So, on to our keynote presentation. It gives me great pleasure to actually welcome back Sarah Knight. Sarah has been connected with the University of Hertfordshire since 2005, when we had the Blended Learning Unit, which was a Centre for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. Sarah was a huge supporter of our work, and through JISC, they sponsored our International Blended Learning Conferences, which Sarah presented at, and they were really supportive in everything we were trying to do in terms of embedding technology within our day-to-day practice within the institution. They also published some case studies from us within their effective practice in digital age, and we've maintained that link with JISC, and particularly with Sarah, through a number of our staff being members of the JISC Learning and Teaching Experts Group. So it's been a real pleasure to be able to invite Sarah back today. So Sarah is now Head of Change in the Student Experience in the JISC Digital Futures Directorate. She manages the JISC Digital Experience Tracker, which is involved in researching staff and student expectations and experiences of the digital environment. She also established and leads the Change Agent Network, which is something, again, which is really close to the work we do at the University of Hertfordshire, because Sarah's project and activities are really about staff-student partnership in terms of e-learning. And of course, some of our key work has been project work with our students and having them as a key agent within those activities. So it's been great to see the work develop, and also a recent conference that Sarah hosted, and actually some of our technology mentors as part of the Guided Learner Journey presented at the conference with Sam and Lucy. So it's really wonderful to welcome her, and I'm sure we're going to have a really interesting and stimulating talk. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, and it's a real privilege to be back here. As I was saying to Helen when I walked in, University of Hertfordshire is one of those universities that we are always talking about your work, about your exemplary practice, about your leadership, but more important, the work that you are doing to make a difference to your student experience. And I think, having been involved over so many years and seen the journey the university has been on, and to see how that practice is evolving and still evolving, and to have so many of you here today at the end of term on a Friday, still here, still enthusiastic, and still wanting to share and discuss your practice. So very, very big thank you for inviting me, Helen, and I'm really looking forward to spending the day with you. So I'm going to be presenting a little bit about the work we've been doing at JISC, but more importantly, I think, drawing on the work that has been going on nationally around digital capability and what it means to become a digitally capable organisation. And it's lovely to hear that technology-enhanced learning is a theme for today, because I think what that does is just open up the possibilities around how technology can enhance what we do. It's not just a toy, it's not just something that we have to do, but it's something that really can enhance our students' experience and also our own. So I'm going to be sharing with you a few thoughts around, hopefully, stimulating some discussions around where you are, what you are already doing, but importantly thinking about where you can go next, and sharing some of the practice that we've been learning through our discussions and through our contacts with universities across the sector. But before I start, what I'd like you to do is just have a think about your digital superpower. What's the one thing that staff come to you or your students come to you and say, can you help me with that? Because we've all got one. And just to take a few moments, just for the person sat next to you or behind you, if you're not sat closely to someone, just share, what do you think your digital superpower is? And just to have a couple of minutes just sharing your thoughts. Right. From all the buzz in the room, I can sense there's a lot of power in this room and lots of digital superpowers. And I think, when we think about digital capability, there's so many different aspects. And there's so many different aspects that we do in our roles, that we do in our personal lives. And it is just recognising that it does mean different things to different people. And it was lovely just to hear that sort of level of discussion going. And that's what today is all about, being able to share our experiences, our thoughts and our views. And it's something that we have been working on quite over a number of years, going back to 2008, in fact, in terms of our initial work around what we used to call digital literacies. But we are seeing that there is a real growing importance and recognition that all staff and students need to have some aspects and acquire those digital skills in order to be able to live, learn and work in a digital world. And if we think about just our journey to work or just our everyday lives, how much digital, whether we like it or not, is very much is seamlessly integrated into what we do. We know that there is a very much more emphasis on digital in the workplace, and particularly thinking about our graduates, when they move out into the workplace, we do need to ensure that they have got those digital skills that make them able to thrive in the workplace and in their chosen profession. But we also know from a lot of reports, nationally in the UK, but also in Europe, that employers are still finding that graduates don't always have the digital skills that they require. We've got large firms that are struggling to recruit workers with the right levels of digital skills. And although it goes back to 2016, there's some later stats on the next slide. Young people in the UK are less digitally literate than many other of our OECD countries. What are students telling us? And Helen referenced the work we've been doing at JISC and at the University of Hertfordshire using our Student Digital Experience Tracker, which is a project that we've been working on over the past 3 years to elicit student views in the form of a survey, but with a student engagement process surrounding it. And you'll have some data that you've got locally around what your students are saying, but nationally from our 2017 findings, and I think it's likely to be the same in terms of the findings that we're having this year, is that although students recognise the value of digital skills in their chosen career, only 50% in higher education agree that the course prepares them well for a digital workplace. There's lots of reasons that might be around underpinning that, but that is quite a concerning statistic if we are thinking about how our courses are being perceived by students and linking it through to the authentic experience that they are having when they move out into the workplace. Half of learners don't know what skills are going to be required on their courses before they started it, and 40% agree they haven't been told what digital skills they need to improve. So some quite concerning messages there in relation to student perceptions and how we think about overcoming those. As I said, we've got some updated statistics there on that slide in relation to the supply of digital skills lagging behind demand. And those statistics are from a really very interesting report recently been published by Nesta and Moody, and have got some very useful comparisons around the work that is happening in the UK with Europe and also globally, and also looking at what a lot of commercial companies are doing as well to address that shortfall in digital skills in the workforce. So definitely one to recommend you having a look at. So what are digital capabilities? I started initially saying, let's think about your digital superpower. What do you feel really good at and confident at? But let's just take a moment to hear a short animation that the University of Derby put together based on the work that we've been doing at JISC in relation to what we mean by digital capabilities. And hopefully this will just jog a few thoughts in terms of what it means to you in your context and in your role.
Technology is entering nearly all aspects of our life. So much now can and is done using a digital platform. Communicating, finding information, shopping, tracking our health and solving problems are just some of the activities which are increasingly facilitated by digital tools. This is why our digital capabilities, the skills, knowledge and understanding which help us live, learn and work in a digital society are so important. Employers are increasingly looking at what digital capabilities applicants and employees have. Skills in creating documents, presentations, spreadsheets, and communicating via email and social media are areas which are important to most organisations. They want people to use technologies to access information, be creative, innovative, solve problems, communicate, participate, learn, and support others in digital spaces. As technology is constantly changing, it's a really good idea to reflect on our own digital capabilities. We should make time to develop those skills that we might not be as confident with, or that we are likely to use more of in the future. We may be able to easily operate a smartphone or find the answers to most questions, but can we assess the reliability of the information we find? We might be able to communicate across different platforms, but can we choose the most appropriate communication for the task at hand? Can we manage our digital identity so it reflects us in the way that we want? And can we manage the time we spend interacting with technology? Thinking about how we develop our digital capabilities will help us become better prepared for an increasingly digital world. Take some time to explore digital capabilities and work out what you already do well and what you may need to develop for the future.
So I hope that just unpicked what we mean by digital capabilities, and in particular thinking about your students. You know, we have this perception that students grow up with technology, that it's seamlessly integrated into all that they do. But when we think about those critical skills, the knowledge, the understanding, to be able to apply technology to their learning, to become effective learners, that's something that is not always easy for students to do. And certainly all the work that we've been involved in over the years, and I know many of you in the room have been involved in that work too, everything points to students pointing to their tutors as that point of contact and knowledge and guidance in relation to how to make the most of digital for their learning. So the digital capability framework that we've been working on at JISC, that was developed by Helen Beetham, pulls together those elements of what we mean to be digitally capable. And right at the centre you have our ICT proficiency, which is where we all start. It's, well, how do I use this? How does that work? I haven't got time to read the manual, I just want to know how it works. And often we get very focused in on those set of skills. But what we also need to be developing, particularly for our students and ourselves, is thinking about how we make best use of the technology. How do we apply it to be able to support us with developing our problem-solving skills, with thinking about how we manage data. And I just love those data visualizations that you'd constructed. There's some wonderful themes there. You know, it's starting to think with data becoming more and more important and driving perhaps some of the decisions even more so. We need to be able to have those skills to critically assess what the data is telling us and how to then make those supporting interventions with our students. It's thinking about how we use those tools to effectively communicate and collaborate. And I think there as well, I loved the session that you had about getting into bed with Twitter and Facebook. You know, we have, again, this perception that students are in their own social spaces, communicating away. And, you know, how do we encourage that collaboration and communication in relation to their learning and to get that engagement? So there's all sorts of areas there to unpick in relation to what is specific to us in our subject area and what is specific to our students in terms of their development. We've also developed some profiles in terms of taking the framework and the 6 elements that are in those circles and mapping them through to different roles. So if we are a teacher in HE, we've mapped our digital capability framework to the UK PSF. So we're able to put together some statements in relation to those different elements on what that digital capability means to us as a teacher if we are delivering to our learning to our learners. What does that mean? What are the tasks? And how can technology support us in those areas? And likewise one for learners. That slide just really goes into a little bit more detail about those 6 elements and very much thinking of those practices, those middle layers, those digital practices associated with the learning activities that we might be developing in relation to that. But also thinking about that outer layer and thinking about our digital identity and our presence and the well-being. You know, when do we switch off our devices? When do we just put technology to one side? Both for us and our students. And it's developing those skills as well in order for us to be able to really have that time away from digital as well. So thinking about your organisation and thinking about the University of Hertfordshire, where do you think you are on that digital journey in becoming a digitally capable organisation? And what does it mean to be a digitally capable organisation? Well, if we think about organisational capability, it's the extent to which the culture, the policies, the infrastructure of an organisation enable and support digital practices. And I think from what I'm looking at in terms of today's programme, in terms of the awards that you have received, the recognition of the TEF, there is a huge amount that you are doing at the University of Hertfordshire that is enabling you to progress on that journey to becoming digitally capable. And, the culture is such an important part of that. And I think, where we are in terms of our higher education sector is that many universities are really just sort of starting out in terms of thinking about some of these issues. How do we support our staff? How do we support our students? So if we think about what are those challenges in moving us forward, and what are the different elements that need to be there to build up a digitally capable organisation, of which we are part of that. What I'd like you to do now is, if you have got a device, a computer or a phone, and you're able to get onto the Wi-Fi, if you can visit Menti, so that's www.menti.com. Some of you may be familiar with using that, and enter the code 698679. And what I'd like you to think about is what's the challenge or what's the barrier for you in terms of developing your digital capability, your own, or being able to support your students develop theirs. What's the top challenge for you? And what we'll do is have a look at those results as they come in. Sorry. So the code's just at the top there, 698679. Time is always one that comes up, and it is a very difficult one to overcome, because we know that every year there's more and more things that we're being asked to do with less and less time to do it in. Interestingly, Wi-Fi is coming up, and that's something that does come up in terms of our students as well. Thinking about access, we tend to assume now that there's seamless access wherever we go, but we're still seeing Wi-Fi, both in higher education and further education, is coming through. It's still a barrier that some students are experiencing as well. That's great, thank you. It's great to see that coming together. Super. I will share the final versions of these with Helen so that you can add those to your conference site. Great, thank you. Well, I hope that just starts to think about some of the barriers, some of the challenges, and what do we need to have in place in order to be able to support you with that development going forward. So if we move on to the next slide, what I would like to share with you are some of the barriers that are coming through nationally. I mentioned the Nesta report earlier that was published earlier this year. And they, again, were looking at the barriers to upskilling the workforce in relation to digital. And although time didn't come up on that one, I think a lot of those factors underpinning there, particularly around some motivation, culture of learning, resources, access to training, those are, again, some of the key barriers that we are finding nationally, not just in the education sector, but in the workplace as well. Leadership also is a key factor there, and a lot of organisations are struggling sometimes to get that senior level buy-in and engagement in order to be able to champion digital capability across their organisation. So interesting to do a comparison there in terms of some of the challenges that were coming through from yourselves and thinking about those barriers to upskilling the workforce that we're seeing there. So how do we get there? Well, no one has the answer to it yet. And I think one of the challenges, but I think one of also the exciting opportunities that digital allows us, is that it allows us to keep ourselves learning. When we're working in a learning organisation, I think it's imperative that we ourselves are constantly on that journey of continuing professional development. Nothing stays still. And, I think for us it's about developing those skills to be able to continually enhance, advance, update our skills and understanding. are thinking about digital capability and what the key underpinning factors there that need to be able to support an organisation move forward in this area. We've mentioned strategic support, and I do think it's important that a university has a way of bringing together those different strands of activity in relation to digital. And it's not just solely thinking about learning and teaching, it's thinking about estates, it's thinking about the whole business process side of an organisation as well, and where technology can support efficiencies and help an organisation to become more effective. It's also the join up with other roles within the organisation, like human resources, like estates, IT, so that we all have that shared understanding of what it means to become a digitally capable organisation. It's one of the tools that we've used with our work with a lot of universities is thinking about auditing your digital capability and in terms of where you are at now. So you have a baseline of which you can then progress from and look at areas for development across the organisation. If we are thinking about that language and, thinking about the video clip I played, asking you the question about your digital superpower, it's having an understanding and a common language around what we mean to become digitally capable, both for ourselves but also with our students. And for our students to gain that terminology, that understanding of what it means to be digitally capable, that it's not solely about being ICT proficient, and start to look at how those skills are developed within their course and within their content. So our digital capability framework is a way of establishing that common vocabulary, and many universities across the UK have now adopted that framework, adapted it to their local context, and seeing that as a starting point for those discussions. Importantly, we mentioned human resources and links through to the processes that human resources support an organisation with. And one of the areas I think that is a challenge, I think, for many universities is to start that dialogue with human resources to say, well, actually, this is embedded throughout all the processes that you do in an organisation. It's very much about supporting recruitment. It's very much about supporting continuing professional development. And it could also link into appraisals and professional development reviews. So there's a lot of opportunities there to start rewarding staff and recognising staff in developing those skills and capabilities, just as we do for our students. And I think, that's, again, something that is important to consider. But one of the things I think we are aware through the research I presented earlier from our students, saying, well, we don't know what skills we need, we don't know what skills we have. How do we start gaining an understanding of where our students are coming from, as well as ourselves? We have been working again with yourselves and the University of Hertfordshire through Karen and also Non to roll out a pilot of what we're calling our digital discovery tool. And some of you may recognise that screen, and it's a tool that we have been developing to support staff and students self-reflect on where they are with their digital capability. And it's a non-judgmental tool that allows staff to work through a series of questions and prompts in relation to that digital capability framework. At the end of those questions, you receive a report which gives you a graphic representation or a visual going back to the framework about the areas of your strengths, the areas for development, but importantly some next steps and thinking about where you could go next and resources that you could link to support you with your own development. And the same applies to students. For an organisation, the data that is collected is all anonymised. So there is nothing there that can be identified to an individual. But what we can do is present back to an organisation visualisations of trends, of looking perhaps by departments or by roles and thinking about development areas that the university can then support you with. And similarly for students. So it's not an objective measure of digital competence or performance, but it's a way to start conversations, both with you and with your students, and thinking about how we can support each other in moving forward with our practice. So we've been piloting that with over 100 organisations across the UK. We've had a pilot running until the end of May. We've still got access to to the 13th of July. And we've developed question sets for different roles. So for staff who are teaching, an all-staff questionnaire. We have developed one for learners, and we're developing one for pre-arriving students and those students arriving at a university to be helped to use within induction, and for library staff as well as researchers in due course. And that will be part of our Building Digital Capability service as we move forward. So just some sort of evaluation findings on how staff and students use the tool and what their reactions were. Well, we've had over 4,800 completions of those question sets across 66 institutions. And that's just broken down into the different sort of sector groupings there. And we've also had over 400 students complete those questions as well. So the overall experience has been very positive. It has encouraged discussions, it's encouraged staff to think differently about their practice. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of this journey, is to have that conversation, to have that discussion, to have that dialogue, and to think about things differently. Lastly, and I think most importantly, we've spoken about the development, what happens at an organisational level, and we've spoken about individuals in developing our practice, but most importantly is linking it back to what you do and linking it back to the curriculum. And thinking about how can we develop opportunities for our students within our lessons, within our teaching, to enable students to develop those digital capabilities. We know that there are subject differences in terms of what digital capabilities are more relevant for particular subject areas. We know that every student will bring their own personal practices with them in terms of digital. We know that we need to be confident in digital in order to be able to apply it to our subject matter. And it's not a separate aspect of learning, it's very much integrated into what we do. We have got some materials on our website that link in the framework and map it onto the curriculum and think about the learning activities that we can develop in relation to those different areas of the framework. And if anyone is interested in that, do speak to me, but we have got a URL there where you can download those materials, some lovely cards that you can work with and make your own activities as well. So for us, that's one of the most important areas, and it is about applying it to practice and thinking about how we can then integrate it into the curriculum so it provides authentic learning opportunities for our students. So what's next, and thinking about the future? Well, for me, it's not about the technology, and it's not about how we can use particular programs and software and developing those sets of skills. For me, I think the most important part for us as staff and for students is to develop those attributes that will enable us to be flexible, to be adaptable to whatever technology comes along, to develop a resilience in our students and a curiosity to explore and to know what is possible and what the opportunities are. And most importantly, I think, and I think Sal mentioned this in her introduction, it's about partnerships. This is not something that we can go on this digital journey alone. It's something that we have to work in partnership with our students, with our peers, with employers. And it's only that we will then actually be able to become a fully digital capable organisation. So we have, again, various sort of models and steps and advice for institutions on how to think about those strategic steps to becoming digitally capable. We have developed some video case studies, we've developed senior leader briefing papers. We are trying to develop a range of materials which can share what other institutions are doing, that we can start to build a community of practice. And we were very fortunate to have Karen present at our community of practice last year, where we were able to pull together over 100 staff from across the UK to come together for a day to share their individual experiences from their organisations and the learning that has moved forward from them in terms of being able to share and learn and develop and feed them that learning back into our community. And I think what's one of the strengths that we have within higher education is opportunities to get together, to network and to share across institutions as well as within our own. So I'd like to challenge you to think about the goodie bag that you're going to take away at the end of the day that Sal mentioned, and to think about what you're going to put inside that goodie bag in relation to digital capability. And I know that you've got some fabulous sessions that you're going to be going along to and hearing more about, but I'd like you to think about, so what one thing are you going to take away from today that is going to accelerate your journey on becoming a digitally capable organisation? It could be in terms of supporting your students, it could be about your own practice, it could be something to feed in and feed back into the organisation about something that we need to be doing more strategically. So I will leave it there. We have got some links, and obviously the slides will be available for you to review at a later stage, should you will. I'll just go back to the if I can go back to the previous slide, and then we will have the Menti code up. If I can. There we go. Great. So I'll pause there, and thank you, Helen. Hoping we can use these.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's really helpful to be thinking about our own skills, our own capabilities, but also importantly, that stat that 50% of our students don't think their courses are quite preparing them yet for where they need to be. So what can we do within our teaching? So as people are thinking about their answers to the Menti question, let's also capture some questions from the room, and we do get to use these catch boxes. So I did say to Karen and Amanda that they need to be ready with the roaming mics, but they sort of don't. They need to be ready to throw these things, or we can throw them. So do we have a question for Sarah?
It's got to be one so we can throw these, hasn't
Yeah,
it, Helen?
someone's got to start. There we go. Right. Go on.
Go on, shall I try? Woo! No?
There we go.
I need to practice my throwing skills. Helen would be much better. She's been practicing.
You mentioned motivation being a problem. Is there a bit of a tension? Because the statistics you showed before is that 80% of students are aware they will need digital skills, but only 50% think they know how to get them. So if they are offered to learn digital skills, shouldn't they be motivated?
I think there's something there about perception and being explicit about what digital skills are required for a course and what digital skills those students will develop on a course. When we have done a lot of focus group work with students, and this goes back as well to some of the work Amanda Jeffries did with us a number of years ago, students said, we want you to actually be explicit and tell us. A lot of what we might do might be implicit in what we teach. And, you know, we are not necessarily pulling out those digital skills because we are assuming that students are picking those up or making those connections. But I think certainly in terms of all our research, students are saying, we want to know at the start of our course and throughout our course as we move along, what technology is, what is expected of us in terms of technology? What are the benefits? Why are we using it? And sometimes that's quite hard to do because we just get on and use it. You know, we don't think about, well, why are we using this? And it does make us perhaps rethink the ways in which we are making that explicit in our teaching so that students are recognising that those are the skills that are not just important in terms of getting through this module or this course, but that's actually what you're going to take with you. And the skills in our workplace. And when we have spoken to, say, our student partners who have been involved on technology-enhanced learning projects, when you ask them what have they benefited from in terms of those projects, not the technology, it's about group work, it's about collaboration, it's about confidence, it's about public speaking. And, you know, those are the subtle skills that they have developed through that process, but those are also skills that they can present with technology. They can collaborate using a whole plethora of digital tools, and it's bringing and linking those two together.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to come back.
Oh, right, it's one at the back, isn't it? It's because they're not got round, I'm sure of it. Oh, brilliant.
Throw, Ralph.
It's not really very...
You need to hold it so they can hear you.
Do I need to hold the
Yes,
thing?
so
Do I?
people can hear
I've
it.
been in the workplace for over 40 years, and the technology has changed vastly. I won't describe it. But the skills that I learnt at school and at university, they were skills which I think you've acknowledged are... They're unrelated to particular technologies. And I'm worried about if we focus on teaching them how to learn particular skills within particular technologies, which are probably already out of date. You know, that's really not what a university education is about, that we shouldn't get too hung up on particular technologies. We should focus on the skills that they're going to need in half a century, probably, in a rapidly changing workplace. You know, things like resilience, partnership, etc., that you're talking about. And you can learn those with a variety of different technologies. So what I would say is don't get hung up on the technology, because it'll be have changed within a few years. That is a question for employers to make sure that their particular recruits are capable of using the particular technology in their particular organization at a particular time. What they will be looking for is these larger skills, which universities have always sought to create. So don't get too hung up on the particular technology.
No, that's a great summary, and I hope that was coming through as well in terms of that list of skills I was saying at the end.
You acknowledge, just a question of emphasis, I think.
Yeah.
There's one right at the back. Karen, you might have to throw to
Okay.
Peter. This
And I'll
is
throw
gonna-
to you in a moment. It's looking around.
Peter. No, Peter. Good throw.
I noticed that in your keynote speech you used an explanimation and some infographics, new terms which are possibly unfamiliar to a number of people. And I've just, by coincidence, 2 days ago finished a course on creating explanations. Do you see the inclusion of more and more enhanced non-textual content as being important to our sort of delivery of our teaching to students?
I think it is a growing area, and I think if we, again, thinking about what we are seeing in the workplace, what we are seeing just around us, there is so much more use of graphics and use of visual cues being made. But I think one also still have to be able to use the textual information as well, and I think it's that combination of both. And we know that, you know, we're just at the moment producing our 2018 report for our student digital experience. And we've been analysing 39,000 student responses. And we're looking at what does the infographic bring in terms of value? You know, what do the images bring that is actually being able to sort of pull out those key points, but still keep the integrity of the data and of the text? So I think, yes, I think it's a growing area of importance, and I think some particular subjects even more so. But we still need to ensure those really important skills of being able to read, to understand, to develop, to have that, that understanding about the literacy and the, the elements of reading those large texts and text information as well. I think, unfortunately, we're living in a society now where everything has to be so many characters in order for us to have the time span to look at it and to engage with it, because there is so much information. And I still think it's so important that we teach our students that appreciation of the richness of language and the richness of text, and to still be able to have that appreciation within that fast pace, short, sharp messages that we're sort of being bombarded with. I'm going to throw down. It's not about the catching, it's about the throwing that's the issue. See? I need to go on a course of throwing catch boxes. That's not my digital superpower.
This partnership here. I think an important point, was that in your presentation you spoke very specifically about the need to integrate human resources and staff training. Because even though I do appreciate the point about that the technology that you're using today is not the technology you'll be using in 10 years' time, or in the case of computer science, they're saying that what the students, around 50% of the tools they're studying today, they will not be present in their workplace in 5 years' time. But there is also components that the tools that we use in our learning and teaching, they have to be authentic. Because if we are using tools that are out of date, that could have an impact on learner engagement and motivation. So it's a big challenge for higher education institutions how to make sure that staff have opportunities to develop.
Absolutely, and some conversations with students at a university in London, they were saying, well, we are on a particular course that is very much about industry-based standards. And they were saying, we know our university is not going to provide us with that software. We go out and get our own laptops, we get our own software packages, because we want to make sure that when we go out, we have got those best possible skills to be able to know those packages that we are going to be using when we go out there, because that's the industry standards. So it is that balance. It's about what you were saying about making sure that we develop those skills of adaptability, of flexibility, as we all do. You know, one day we're using Blackboard Collaborate, the next day we're using Adobe Connect, and you just have to adapt, don't you? You know that there's some basic elements there that you can use in terms of web conferencing, and you'll be able to transfer those skills across, and same with virtual learning environments. But we do also need to make sure that we are keeping up to date as much as we can with what students are going to be experiencing in the workplace if it is relating to a particular profession. Thank you. Oh, I'm not throwing those. I'm not throwing those. I'll never reach you.
Pia, can I ask, you mentioned that students feel they lack digital skills. Given the breadth of digital skills, did the research look any closer at which skills in particular they felt they lacked and which skills they felt more confident in?
That links through very much so to our digital capability work. So the student tracker is identifying that there is that discrepancy and that gap. What we would encourage institutions to do at a local level with the data that they are collecting is to then put together some student focus groups and to have those discussions and look at whether those areas can be unpicked. With the digital discovery tool, that is the purpose of encouraging students to complete that, because that will then determine by subject grouping what are the trends, you know, which of those 6 elements or 15 underpinning sub-elements are students tending to be more confident at, and which are the ones that they are perhaps needing further development around. So there is definitely a link between the two, but equally there is also some work that can be done at a local level with the data that you have actually collected. Helen, do you want to say who's next?
Let's finish with the gentleman who's been waiting. Sharon, can you throw your cube over here?
Oh, we're passing the
No,
cube.
you've got to throw it. That's the point is you've got to throw it. Just down the road to this man. Could you wave? There we go.
Oh, so impressed with these throws.
This is just building on the tracker thing, if I understand what it is. To what extent, with analytics, because to me that's what it is, are you developing and also providing training in setting negative things as well as positive? Because it seems to me that the whole digital thing allows people to avoid learning in as great a way as it allows you to enable learning. So how do you have measures for both, and how do you make sure, therefore, that people who are teaching have access to either developing those analytics or actually using them?
There's quite a few things to unpick on there, and just to say that with the Student Digital Experience Tracker, the data that we collected on the whole, well, certainly at national level, was anonymised. But certain institutions were able to use a unique student identifier and send a survey that would allow them to be able to identify the response back from their individual students. If that was the case, that would then could be put into the pot with other data that they are collecting about their students. So that's a little bit about sort of the analytics side. In terms of the other aspect of your question, in terms of the negatives, Within our student survey, we have put in a number of questions relating to some of the negatives in relation to technology, particularly as well thinking about online learners. One of the areas that is very under-researched, but an area that, again, has a lot of assumptions built around, is that online learners are completely confident with technology and know exactly what to do. And actually, the research we've been doing with online learners actually shows the opposite. They need a lot more support and a lot more bringing together so that they're not feeling isolated. So within our survey questions, we have got quite a few questions that are trying to elicit some of those sort of negatives of technology, the isolation, the barriers, the support aspects, looking at being safe online, digital well-being, what do people do with my data. So there's quite a lot in there as well. Interestingly, from last year's survey, when we asked students around, so looking at the free text responses, the qualitative responses, what was coming through very strongly is that students were saying, we don't want more technology, we want what we've got used better. Mm-hmm. So again, it is looking at that balance, and certainly within this year's report again, it's very much looking at, what are the don'ts, what don't we want to do, as well as what can we do better. I hope that answers that question, because I know there's a lot underpinning that.
Oh, there's a question, Anita, there. Can
I try? I've got to get it right this time. Ooh, nearly.
Okay. Yeah. Sarah, related to your interesting point about employability and also about student well-being and when do we switch off the technology. I wonder if you could elaborate on that. That was very interesting.
Thank you. Well, that is an area I think that there is a growing awareness of, that there's a lot in the press that links into that about mental health and well-being for universities, and Universities UK, Moshi are developing resources for universities to support those discussions with students. The digital aspect of that, I think, is one that we are very critically aware of. And again, it is looking at developing the awareness with students in conversations with staff about when it's appropriate, when do you have that downtime. And through the discovery tool, we have built in a series of questions for students as well as staff that are prompts to get staff and students to start thinking about what should I be doing in that area? Am I taking regular breaks? Am I making sure that I do not have my phone in my room at night, that I can check my emails on? It's starting to embed that into the culture. But it has to be a culture that goes across the organisation, because if you are working in an organisation like I am, where digital is just throughout what we do, it's that expectation, well, hang on, if my colleague's online at that time of night and emailing me, I need to email back. And we also need to sort of stop and say, well, actually, no, it's not appropriate to do that. And we shouldn't all be, working these lengths and using the technology in that way. So it is, again, trying to, as a team, as an organisation, trying to sort of start to unpick that more, and it would make a lovely sort of focus for a project, perhaps a student partnership project as well, to start thinking about tools and tips and ways we can start addressing that area, because it's going to be a growing area of demand. I know we're doing more work in that at JISC as well.
Another question? I don't know where our boxes are.
There's one here. Oh, great throw. Oh, brilliant.
Hi. Oh, this is the top. I thought that was very interesting. I liked the infographics using the coaching and mentoring wheel of life to illustrate the results of a needs analysis. Instantly, I could see, boom, where the priorities should be. So I thought that was very good. In your research, you had quite a significant number of people from the FE sector as well as HE sector. Have you noticed any particular trends in the two different sectors?
Yes, it's really interesting because we're at the midst of analysing this year's data, and in some areas there's very little difference in terms of perhaps the quality of learning and teaching in a digital sense, the quality of what they're expecting in terms of the use of technology on their courses. Where we are seeing significant differences in the environment, that FE students are still seeing more issues with Wi-Fi, more issues around equity of access. We tend to assume, don't we, that all students have their own technology and devices. In FE, there obviously isn't, that's not always the case. And, you know, it's certainly not always the case in universities. I know that many colleges or universities are ensuring that they are banks of tablets or laptops that students can loan, or providing them with a device as they enter university. The other area is around online safety and digital well-being. Going back to our previous question, in FE there is quite a large emphasis around online safety, partly because of the age differences that they can have students as young as 16. And hence the online digital well-being aspects were quite prominently covered in FE. In HE, we're seeing a lower percentage of students saying they know where to go to get advice in relation to online safety. They feel that they have got those skills to know how to be safe online. And again, that perhaps goes back to the expectations of what we think our students are coming in with. And we tend to assume if they've been through secondary school, they're arriving, they've had all that training. And I think certainly our work we've been doing with schools is showing that that's certainly not the case. And although they are told the don'ts, and everything is, you know, switch off, you don't use, you don't touch, they're not being encouraged to then develop those skills in a safe environment. The last area is around data protection. And I think this will come through more strongly in this year's survey as well, that there is perhaps a greater awareness from students around data being collected, and perhaps more, what students are saying, well, we don't really know how our data is being used. So those are sort of, and for FE, that's perhaps not such a concern at the moment, because there is not that emphasis at the moment on learning analytics as we're seeing in HE. So I'd be interested to know how that compares with what Amanda's found at Hertfordshire, but we'll hear a bit later on that.
One last question. It's right down the front here, I think, if we can get one of the boxes. That's going to come forward. Right, this is going to challenge.
Who's going to catch it?
Oh, heads! Well done, Adam. I thought you were going to get it.
Should come with a health and safety warning, shouldn't it?
My question is to do with, what's your advice, or what's the organization giving in terms of managers responsible for budgeting? So what strategies are they giving for budgeting for digital literacy? Because, for example, at UH we have a move to Canvas. People are starting to create resources.
Yes.
But when it comes to like laptops, some laptops for staff are too old, or maybe they don't have good microphones. So what strategies do you give, or have you actually seen people in leadership should really think of when you're promoting this digital literacy?
It's such an important question. And, you know, going around the country and meeting senior leaders and, you know, seeing different organisations, there is still a huge amount of awareness raising that we need to do with senior leaders. Within JISC, we've been working quite closely with some institutions to deliver courses around digital leadership. Not in terms of, you know, using technology, you know, in terms of the business sense, but in terms of actually you as an individual, as a leader, what should you have an awareness of in relation to digital, and how do all these different elements that make up your digital capable organisation, what needs to be in place to make that happen? And obviously infrastructure and planning and development is absolutely core to that. In relation to our student tracker, we have also developed a staff tracker. And we've had 15 institutions work with us on piloting that, because a lot of what we're saying is it's all about student voice, which is absolutely fabulous and what we need to do. But we also need to balance that with getting staff views. And it's so important that staff feel that they have a voice to talk about their needs, to talk about their access, to talk about their use on their course, to talk about their skills development. And the vision that we have is that you have your data coming through from your students, you have your data coming through from your staff, and you have your organisational data. And you're able to do then a 360-degree comparison to get that overview. And what that can be very powerful then in saying to senior leaders, if there is evidence that 90% of your staff are saying, you know, that we need better laptops, or we need better access, or we don't have the supporting technology in order for us to do our jobs, you've then got some evidence to actually present back to senior leaders. So it is a question of developing their skills as leaders. It is a question of also having some evidence back from staff as a group that can be quite powerful about identifying those needs and trends. And also to say that no one's cracked it yet. And where we are with institutions at the moment is that everything is being reduced in terms of budgeting and finance, and it's not easy. I'm sorry I don't have a direct answer for you, but I hope that just shows that across the sector, as a picture, you know, that we are all on that journey and no one has got everything perfectly right. But there are ways that we can gather that evidence to support those views.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to thank Sarah hugely for a really stimulating talk, and just by hearing the questions, there's a lot for us to think about, not only from our own development as staff members, but also institutional strategic leadership and budgets and finance, but also importantly from our student development as well. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.